Hello, everyone. Welcome to this first episode of Nethone's podcast. My name is Patrick Drexler. I'm head of business development at Nethone. And today I'm here with Michał from Straal. Michał is the CEO of Straal, a payment service provider. Welcome, Michał.
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Patrick, for this short introduction.
Thank you very much for joining our podcast today. Maybe you could just give a quick introduction on who you are, what and who Straal is, and talk a little bit about that and your experience in the payments and fraud industry, and then we will kick off today's topics.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yes, I mean, when it comes to Straal, I mean, we are a payment gateway at its core. I believe that our platform is best summarized when you talk about payment orchestration. So that means that we're not only enabling merchants to sell their goods and services online via their websites or mobile applications, but also actually help them to do it in a sustainable way when it comes to costs, the risks that are involved, the analytics that are involved. So really handle all the needs that can somehow help them to process payments in an effective way, from frauds to optimization to analytics, subscription management, and so on. When it comes to my experience in payments, I mean, actually, I have started in the payments industry a few years before Straal. I have worked as a consultant for 4 years before joining Straal, mostly working actually in the financial service industry, advising banks, insurers, and all the payment-related companies. And that's how I would say my adventure with payments has started. And after I have decided to actually go more on the executional side rather than just advising clients and do something that will bring some value to the payments industry.
Okay, thank you very much. Today we actually have quite a few topics. There are several topics in fraud and payment which are trending at the moment, and this is also going to be main part of our conversation today. So when it comes to trends for 2021, you've been working in payments for many years now. What do you see as the biggest trends for the coming year? How do you or what do you think has changed in regards to potential developments for the next year, also due to the current situation with COVID? Maybe you could just give us a quick outlook on the key things that you believe will change and the key drivers of the next year in payments and potentially also fraud.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in 2020, I believe that there are several topics that are going to be somehow hot or trending. The first one being regulatory, with PSD2 finally coming to the last steps of implementation. There's a lot of happening in that space when it comes to strong customer authentication, but as well when it comes to the open banking industry. What are the use cases, how it is implemented? Is it going to be implemented well, and what's its usability is going to be looking forward? So there's a lot of things going on here. On top of that, I mean, especially connected again with the open banking sector, and more broadly as well with alternative payment methods. What's going to happen to the most popular payment method, which is card payments so far? My take on that is that they are going to be challenged. There are new payment methods that are going to become challengers. We're seeing it on the regional level. We're seeing it more on the local levels too. So there is a lot of going on here. And when it comes to what can we expect in terms of COVID, I mean, I believe that there's a big consumer behavior shift after that was mainly imposed due to restrictions that are related to COVID, but some of them are going to stay looking forward. The question is, which one and what can we expect after the restrictions are lifted, after the vaccine is implemented. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to happen in the coming year.
Definitely, yeah. So thanks a lot for that quick overview and what you believe is going to happen next year. I would like to start today's conversation with strong customer authentication. Actually, as you know, obviously the timeline is now really, or the roadmap for and the timeline for implementation of strong customer authentication connected to the PSD2 is coming to an end. So we have seen that by the 1st of January, strong customer authentication becomes mandatory across almost all Europe. And straight away question here is, we have seen that there are a few delays. So in particular, the UK will be exempted for now. So they were granted a grace period. I believe it is until September next year to fully implement strong customer authentication. But how do you see the current situation with the rest of the European countries? Do you believe that there will be any exemptions after the 1st of January? Do you believe that actually all banks, such as payment providers, are ready for SCA, or do you believe that there will that it will not really be consequently applied everywhere, or that there might be some loopholes that banks or payment providers can find to avoid this strong change and cut actually as of the 1st of January? How do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really complex question because, I mean, yes, I believe that there won't be a unified implementation across the entire EEA region, across the entire ecosystem from January 1st. That's for sure. I mean, UK already has, like you mentioned, applied. I mean, imposed a delayed deadline until September 2021. I believe that there are some actually other countries that have delayed it by a couple of months, such as France or Denmark. Not sure if that's been actually officially already mentioned, but yeah, I believe that's another sign that either issuers or acquirers are not ready yet to have that ready on January 1st. On top of that, we have heard that due to the pandemic and the disruption that COVID actually has imposed on the entire industry, the merchants as well are not ready and do not have the resources to implement the necessary changes on their sides. Namely, as well, I have seen that there's a lot of talks about the travel industry, who had a lot going on. I mean, with an extremely decreased number of traffic in the air, and the people traveling, whether it is for business or for leisure. They basically said that 60% of the entire industry is not ready to implement to be ready for January 1st. So I don't believe that everybody will be ready. There probably will be consequences, in my opinion, rather mild rather than strong, looking into January onwards. But it really depends on if you're a merchant and issuer, how that will differ.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I believe like my view on this is similar. It is very hard to imagine a straight cut actually as of the 1st of January. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting on how this is going to be handled, because actually, yeah, the timelines are quite clear, but the word is really among different payment providers and acquiring banks that they're not ready. This is actually the case for many countries in the EU. So yeah, it's going to be really exciting on how this will be applied.
If you're looking on the merchant side, it's always better to be ready, right? I mean, you're not risking that the authorization rates are going to go down from January 1st. If you are ready, you can only expect basically better fraud protection. So I mean, there's no risk associated if you have 3DS 2.0. I believe that there should be some kind of A/B testing at the beginning, and merchants should be ready to either go with the new flow if it's necessary, and test as well the old flow to see how it compares, if there are actually really any differences between the second one. If 3DS turns out better, there's always the liability shift to the issuer, which is great for the merchants because they're not responsible for any fraud-related kinds of chargebacks. On the issuer side, I believe that again, they might not entirely be ready either, meaning that they will be taking some of the liability in case there is some kind of chargeback, fraud-related chargeback. Nevertheless, if you're looking at the entire ecosystem, whether it is acquirers, issuers, merchants, there will be a fragmentation, I believe, and as long as there's not a unified system and customer experience across the entire market, and we can already see that there will be different deadlines. It doesn't really make sense for the issuers to actually enforce hardly a strong customer authentication, right? It is in nobody's interest to have low authorization rates, lower traffic, because the entire ecosystem just stops making money. So I really believe that the decline ratios from January 1st are not going to be very harsh. We will see some changes, of course, but it will be rather a slow implementation until everybody in the EA region is compliant.
Do you believe that as a direct consequence, obviously, strong customer authentication will be applied more often, and it will obviously change the way people pay online very much for many people, because it will at some point be mandatory at all steps of the way, or almost all steps of the way, when purchasing online. What do you think is the impact on card payments in general, like e-commerce card payments in general? Do you believe there is a shift away from cards because of strong customer authentication, or do you believe there is a natural trend to for just the involvement of online payments?
No, I believe that strong customer authentication will be applied anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's credit cards or some kind of other payment methods involved across the EA region. So I don't believe that it's a major factor in moving away from credit cards. I believe that here we're talking more about a general trend on what other payment methods are easier to pay with, more seamless for the customers, especially now that the customer experience is so actually crucial in the entire checkout page. We're trying to make everything as seamless as possible in as low number of clicks as possible, and credit cards maybe are not the best payment method in that case. So people are turning actually to something else.
Speaking of payment methods as an alternative to credit card payments, what do you see? I believe you mentioned open banking during the introduction already. Do you believe that open banking will be playing a key role, or will take a large part of card payments at some point? And what are your expectations towards open banking for the next year, or maybe even for the next 2 years?
I believe that the entire industry is still quite far away. We at Straal, we're trying to follow what are the latest development in that sector, in that area, because we see that there's a lot of interest from the merchants to use actually open banking. There are several advantages of actually using the entire open banking infrastructure, considering that it will work well and there will not be any problems with the stability of the APIs. One of it is there's no middlemen that will charge provisions, so it is basically cheaper. There's no such thing as chargebacks, so there's no risk involved in the transaction itself. There's no fines involved when it comes to the transaction itself. So there are clear advantages of using that payment method. However, I believe that we are still quite far away because of the stability issues that I have mentioned actually at the beginning. It really depends on the country that you are looking for. So you can see anything from the UK, where they are pretty much ready because they already had some kind of standard before, to markets that are, I would say, somewhere in the middle, such as, for example, Poland, where there were similar payment methods before, such as pay by links, that have been working in a very similar way, however, with some kind of entity in the middle that is doing the settlements for the merchants themselves. But now they are implementing also a similar standard, which is based on the open banking API, up to countries that didn't have any kind of infrastructure and are still struggling to actually implement it. But in all cases, we see that banks are they're struggling to, or maybe not struggling, but not always willing to implement the API properly, or even do it in a way that will provide a stable environment to initiate payments, or to actually even download the account information that is guaranteed by AISP. So yeah, still a lot of challenges to go. I believe that when you're looking at 2020, I mean, this will be a year, 2021. Sorry, this will be a year that you see a lot of those things stabilizing. I believe that it will still take a couple of months, and it will be maybe even looking forward into 2022, where this will really be a useful payment method, and we'll see use cases across the entire European Union.
I understand you work in payments, and payments are always directly in one way or another associated with potential fraud. Do you see any trends in payment fraud that are arising? Are you witnessing any changes in the behavior there? I understand that many merchants have already applied strong customer authentication along the way, but as we know, the creativity of fraudsters, especially in e-commerce and related to payments, is almost endless. So do you have any insights there, maybe among different industries or in general, of how the behavior has changed, how they are adapting, and what are their preferred payment solutions actually to encounter? Or is it less associated to the particular payment method, or do you maybe see it more connected to the customer, to the account experience of the customer with the merchant? How do you see this?
I mean, I believe that you'll be able to actually reply to that question better than I can, since you are in the fraud space. I mean, you're involved in the fraud space actually much more than I do. I mean, from what I can see, I mean, yes, with development of the SCA, with the new regulations, development of biometrics, there is a trend that merchants will be better protected. More than curious to actually see what's your perspective on that.
I believe what we see a lot is phishing attacks. So phishing is a very trending topic for account details, actually. So definitely, I mean, of course, we always talk about PSD2 and strong customer authentication, but when we talk about this, we're only talking about Europe. So obviously, in many countries, things will not change as of 1st of January. So card fraud will, of course, remain a huge topic around the globe in almost any country. We see there are regulations on the way which will change this at some point as well, and there are obviously also countries, mentioning Japan, who've actually never had those issues like we had them or are having them in other geographies. So obviously this remains a topic for us, but it's really very much moving out of Europe. So what we see really is we see an increasing trend also since actually COVID, the COVID wave, the first COVID wave in account takeover. So account takeover attacks are massively growing among basically any industry. Merchants are telling us the same. I've been speaking to retailers who told me that actually during the first 4 months of the year, the amount of ATO attacks grew by 30%. Some even told us 60%, and this trend is continuing. So this is definitely a very, very big topic. And this also, like, obviously, it's also it's always a cat and mouse game. So fraudsters are becoming very, very creative, and they are always adapting to the situation. Like it will be very interesting to see what fraudsters will be coming up with over the next months and years. But those are basically the two key trends that we see, or that I see in my daily work. And we also see, if we're talking about countries like in particular Germany, where credit cards are much less attractive or less used, we see a very strong shift towards relatively unsecure payment methods, which are SEPA direct debit, because for SEPA direct debit you still have the chargeback risk, and you don't have the schemes involved there, so it is quite, and the costs vary a lot from bank to bank. So it's a risk that one can easily put numbers to and calculate. So there's actually a you see the cost of fraud associated to SEPA direct debit straight away. And then the second big topic is really pay later, any kind of pay later solution. So pay later, pay by installment, but also digital lending. Those verticals are really struggling, and it's becoming more and more difficult and more expensive. Since fraudsters have to move away from other payment methods, I believe this is also a reason behind why those are trending. So that's very much what we see.
Yeah, and I believe that, I mean, you have actually mentioned an interesting topic, which is that, you know, SCA will reduce but will not eliminate fraud entirely, because there will still be exemptions on transactions, because there will be still a lot of out of scope transactions, and merchants will probably use them to not go through the new flow. And in all those cases, of course, you know, fraud will be possible, right? You mentioned one leg out. So, you know, if the merchant or acquirer or even the issuer is outside of the EA region, there will be a lot of merchant-initiated transactions, motor transactions.
I guess we're actually already coming to an end of this first episode. But before we come to an actual end, I would still like to ask you, what do you see as the key challenges, maybe the top 3 key challenges and changes for 2021, and also directly related to COVID and the way e-commerce is developing?
When it comes to challenges, I believe that, you know, I'm going to repeat here myself a little bit, but definitely this, you know, continue on the work on all sides of the ecosystem on the implementation of the strong customer authentication. On top of that, again, implementation of the open banking and stabilization of the API among the issuing banks, so that it is a reliable payment method, it is a reliable source of account information services. So that there's still a lot of work to be done in order to make it very, I mean, useful and comparable and challenging enough for other payment methods available on the market. When it comes to COVID, I mean, we have all seen that there's have been an acceleration in the digitalization trend, and shops, retail, e-commerce, shops and retail moving to the online space. I read in a report actually that up to 50% of the changes that have been somehow imposed or forced on the consumption due to the restrictions that were involved, they are here to stay in general. And they are here to have some kind of long-term effect, right? So if we have seen, for example, a 100% increase in sales in, for example, digital sports, up to 50% is expected to stay in that. Of course, it really depends on the categories and that you are looking at. I mean, we cannot probably expect for people to keep up with the online grocery shopping. There will still be people going to shops. I mean, especially young people miss interactions. So I believe that people will still go to shopping malls to meet with their friends, because that's I would say a broader phenomenon that is here involved and that comes into play. What has been actually, I believe, interesting when it comes to the changes in consumer behaviors is that people during COVID times, use their phones to make payments and do shopping online, despite being all the time at home, right? So I mean, the general consensus before was that people are using mobile phones due to the fact that they are on the go, and it is actually easier to use a mobile phone than take out your laptop and make shopping there. But people, even though they were at home, they had access to the laptops. Actually, the share of mobile payments have increased during COVID times, and I believe that is a trend that is here to stay, and that is here to actually even accelerate, looking into the years ahead. So that's a very interesting phenomenon to be looked at.
Definitely. Yes, so all that's left to say then is thank you very much for your time, Michał. It has been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for sharing those valuable insights. I'm sure we will at some point of our podcast series have the chance to talk to you again, and especially once we have seen what is actually going to happen on January 1st. So we will surely be taking a look back then and see what we were saying before and what will be the result of it. But again, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for participating in this podcast, and all the best.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. Very happy to participate. Yes, and also wish you all the best.
Thank you.